Hello, this is Dakota from I'll Walk With You. On this episode, we are honored to be joined by Richard Ostler. Richard is from Salt Lake City, Utah, and is an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He is the author of 3 books and is the host of the podcast Listen, Learn, and Love. As an LGBTQIA ally, Richard has dedicated much of his life's work to the advocacy of greater love and acceptance of queer individuals, particularly within the LDS community. In this episode, Richard shares some of his life story and personal growth journey from viewing queerness as something that could be corrected to the broader acceptance of all people exactly as they were created, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. He shares some of his experience of challenge and growth from his former church service as a young single adults bishop. In this honest conversation, we discuss the importance of self-acceptance, personal revelation, and relationship with God, as well as how we can all love one another more fully. We hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. My mom and I were also recently guests on Listen, Learn, and Love. The link to that episode, as well as links to more about Richard, will be included in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I'll Walk With You, where we have conversations about how we can all be more unified on our walk with others. My name is Dakota, and
I'm Rhonda Monson. Nice to have you with us. We're just super excited. I'm super excited to have Richard with us today. Richard Ostler has written a great couple of books, but one that's really touched my life. Listen, Learn, and Love, and has done, I don't even know how many podcasts you have done now.
A lot.
A lot. Like over 1,000, correct?
In the high 800s.
Okay.
So close to 1,000.
Okay. I obviously haven't listened to every single one, but the ones that I've listened to have greatly impacted my life and touched my life. I feel like the work you're doing helps me be a better person, and I know that that's true for others as well. So thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Glad to be here with both of you.
Yeah. We're excited to do this together, and excited to share a tiny bit of our story in what we do, but also so many great people like yourself who have paved a way of people walking together. I mean, that's the whole purpose and the title of our thing is just walking together in life and realizing we don't have to be the same in everything to hold space of love, to hold space of compassion, that we still can share each other's walk.
yeah, absolutely. And from everything that I've seen of you as well, I can just be an echo chamber here and say that I completely agree. I think that your work is just so honorable and has helped so many people genuinely. And so we both thank you so much for everything that you do. Um, and I
Thank
would
you.
love to hear a bit of a self introduction from you for those of our listeners who have no idea who you are.
Well, thanks, both of you, Rhonda and Dakota. Yeah, my name is Richard Ostler. I'm in my mid 60s. Um, lived in Utah growing up. Met my wife while at BYU, who's from Texas. We got married in the I should know the date. It is 1990. So we've been married 25 years. We have 6 children. We have, depending on the day, we have 4 or 5 grandchildren. It's kind of a moving number right now. And we don't have any queer kids. So I didn't enter this space because, like a lot of people are, either they're queer or they, like you, Rhonda, you're parenting a gay son. So I came in this space for your listeners while serving as a YSA bishop about 10 years ago, and a couple brave men had the courage to open up to me that they were gay. And I didn't know much about the space. And kind of a rebuke of the spirit. God said to me, because I want to do the right thing, he said, everything you learned about queer people is from straight people. And you may or may not really, and you may not even know what the church is teaching today because you kind of picked up stuff from the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, in a rebuke of the spirit, God said to kind of wipe my hard drive clean using a computer term and start from scratch and listen to people like you, Dakota, and like you, Rhonda, and figure out what the church was saying, which was a little different than they were saying in the 80s, because I wanted to lift the burden of these good men versus add to the burden with some of my uninformed opinions about gay people. So that's the beginning of my road into this space that started about 10 years ago.
Yeah. I just want to clarify for some of our listeners who may not be members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that YSA is Young Single Adult. In our church, we have congregations that are specifically for young single adults. And you were a bishop for that congregation, for that age group, which I think is 18.
It was about 18 to 31 at the time, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just wanted to clarify that.
Good clarification.
The lingo.
So, part of more of my story in this space is towards the end of that assignment, I connected with Allison Paul on Instagram, LDS Latter day Saint or Mormon parents that were talking about this subject. And then one day she posted, and this is really tragic, the most tragic thing that can happen, that her own son, her own gay teenage son, north of Salt Lake, died by suicide. And she actually posted about that the day after. Instagram's like the happiest place, but she bravely posted that this happened. And in her post, she said, "My son was gay. He's a squared peg trying to fit in a round hole and suffered immensely." And then she invited all of us that we can do better by recognizing differences and loving others. And I just felt as my church assignment in that congregation was ending to step in this space as an ally, to be supportive of my church, its leaders, and also do everything I could to support LGBTQ Latter-day Saints in or out of our church as they made their way forward. And all the proceeds of that book you mentioned go to the Stockton Powers Memorial Scholarship. So I'm in this space as a labor of love. It's not to make royalties. I'm in a situation in my career where I can just self-fund this, and I'm honored to do it. And one of the things I try to do, even though right now I'm talking, is to really get out of the way. And that's why I started the podcast, because my heart changed listening to LGBTQ people. Um, and so that's really why I started the podcast, was to give, to use my privilege to create a platform people that have less privilege and less voice so that they could share their stories. And I know people are harder to hate close up, move in. So that's really been the focus of that podcast. It's named, as you said, Listen, Learn, and Love, because that's kind of the process I went through. I had to be willing to listen. And sometimes it's easier for men my age to talk and have opinions, and it's harder sometimes for people like me to listen and be willing to learn and recognize that I needed to change. And some of my assumptions were absolutely wrong. And so that's part of the learning process, is willing to learn. And I call it the trap of unearned opinions. It's easy for me to have opinions about Black teenagers or Somalian refugees or gay Latter-day Saints. It's harder for me to say I'm not going to develop any opinions about that group of people until I go meet a lot of people in that group and then maybe see them the way God sees them. And then that allows me to love better because I am more informed on what to say and what not to say and how I can support this different groups of people that are walking a harder road than I'm walking. So that's really what I've been doing the last 10 years, is wrote that book you mentioned, but mostly now it's just podcasts where people can share their stories. And we do podcasts of people that stay in the church, our church. We do episodes of people that feel their best path forward is to step away from the church and be in a same-sex marriage. And I've learned, like the title of your podcast is just, I'll walk with you. I will let you self-determine your best way forward. Um, and I will walk with you as you walk that road. and leave any judgment to our Savior. And so some of the podcast episodes are try to build bridges, which you're doing, obviously, between people that are just walking different roads in life, and keep the family circle together if possible. Um, and try to, I can't control people's outcomes, but I hopefully can preserve the relationship. So that's a little bit of my journey, and my heart has grown in ways that weren't possible as I've met. I mean, I sort of thought I'm going to be like the Good Samaritan here on the road to Damascus and rescue people, but queer people have rescued me.
Mm.
They have taught me things about compassion, empathy, kindness, grace, all these wonderful gospel principles that no one else has ever taught me because they've had to walk such a difficult road. And they are some of my heroes. So I feel they've rescued me. And that's one of the great gifts listening to people outside of our normal circle can do for us.
I think that's so beautiful. Uh, Amen to that 100%. It's hard to judge someone when they're close to you, when you're in proximity with them. Um, it opens a world of love. One of my experiences when I first became a mental health counselor is I did not want to work in community mental health at all. I didn't want to work with addicts. I didn't want to work with the homeless. I just I was uncomfortable with that demographic and I didn't want to work with that. And the Lord loves my I don't want to do this list and loves to put me in those situations. And when Dakota's dad asked for a divorce, I was going into private practice and I was just barely starting. I wasn't making any money and I needed an income and I needed benefits and I needed those securities. And so I applied for a job at Community Mental Health and I got the job at Community Mental Health. And one of my very first clients who came in was homeless, was a meth addict, had tracks on her arm, um, smelled bad. Um, and my first thought was, this is why I don't want to work here. This is why I
It's
didn't want
so
to.
honest.
And the spirit was instantly, she is precious to me. And oh man, I had to change, like I was called to repentance. It had nothing to do with where she was at or the lifestyle choices that she was making. It had everything to do with me holding a safe space for her as her therapist, but just as a human being to share the safe space for her to come. I had the privilege and honor of working with her for 3 years.
Wow.
Loved her. We both cried when I left that job. Um, we have to be willing to step out of our comfort zones, to be with people who walk a different road than we do, so that we can learn and grow and become better. It's I'm the same. I went into mental health counseling to be that good Samaritan, as you said. I wanted to be that good person who helps people and lifts people. And my clients, my LGBTQ plus family, and friends. I have so many friends in the community. Um, my friends of different faiths, my friends of no faith, they are my teachers.
That
They
is
are
beautiful.
what helps me become better. It
That is beautiful.
just is. The Lord wants so much for us. He wants us to grow.
That is
He wants
beautiful.
so much growth for us, but we have to be willing to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I saw something recently that said if you are praying for flowers, don't be surprised when it starts to rain. Uh,
Well,
Yeah.
and I really do think that we all need that reminder, regardless of our uh, regardless of our religious or spiritual beliefs. It's just kind of I guess, a universal law, if you will, that in order for growth to occur, pain is inevitable.
Yeah.
Discomfort is inevitable. When we when we grow a muscle, it has to break down and tear. When um, there are certain species out in nature that only grow after fire. Rain is necessary for life to exist in the wild. Like we can't just expect all rainbows and butterflies. In order
Well
for a
said.
rainbow to happen, we need the rain.
Yeah.
Well said.
So, Richard, when those first people that came into your office as a bishop came in who were in the LGBTQ plus community, how was that for you at the very beginning?
Well, it was uncomfortable. It's probably like your experience, in your mental health work that's so important. I was uncomfortable because I think maybe culturally, or maybe there were even church messages I heard that my job was kind of stay away from the LGBT community. They posed some threat to me and my family, and I did never see them as our own people. I kind of saw them as this outside threat. It was never said what the threat was. So I felt to be faithful in my faith, I was kind of be careful around this group, whatever that looked like. And then it all shifts, as having a gay son. Um, when it's somebody in this case that I had what we would call in our church priesthood responsibility or ecclesia, they were looking for me for pastoral care, and they were vulnerably opening up to me, praying and hoping that I would help them. And that's a pretty same thing as a mom may feel or a dad with a kiddo is you want to do the right thing. So I was conflicted because that wasn't a space I knew what to say. And maybe the best thing I did at first is I didn't say anything except thank you for your courage to open up to me. And I may have said, I need some more time and I'll keep this conversation private. Obviously, you're welcome at church. I'm your friend. We'll walk this road together. Um, but then I had to do a lot of figuring out, this space. And the first thing I did is I went to the LDS Church website and I tried to understand what the church was teaching. It was teaching things different than I would have said. I grew up in an era where this was a choice and you could do something to choose it. And if we could just figure out, I'm going to pick on Dakota here, because you're our gay friend in this podcast. Um, so I would have looked at Dakota, you know, 15 years ago. You weren't out 15 years ago because maybe you were at 15, you're 30 now.
Yeah.
He was. But I would have said something like, well, there's some backstory here. Something happened, Dakota. If we can just figure that out, we'll get you back to straight. The assumption is you're a straight person. Something happened. If we can undo that, you're back to straight.
Yeah.
And our church doesn't teach that. Elder, our quotes are, this isn't a choice, and a change in orientation shouldn't be expected or demanded. And that was kind of an aha moment for me because it took the responsibility off my gay congregation members to become straight and put the responsibility on me to help them go forward as a gay Latter-day Saint. And that's a big paradigm shift that occurred for me in a very quick frame once I just realized this. So, people have compared this. I have blue eyes. I'm not left-handed, but left-handedness is about 11% of the population. And I can't pray to Jesus and change my eye color or my hair color. Those are just what I believe are immutable attributes that are good. And um, and in our church, we talked about the atonement. I read a quote from Ben Shalati, a gay Latter-day Saint. He said, "I thought the atonement was meant to make me straight, but what it did is it healed my broken heart." And you are probably aware of that quote. And so Christ, I believe, has a role here, but it's not to change sexual orientation. Maybe that's possible. I mean, Christ and God can do anything, but I think just believing one more prayer is going to make me straight causes people to falsely conclude that God doesn't love them because they're still not straight. And maybe they've served a mission and they want to come home from that plane straight. So, one of the things I learned in this process is I believe in Satan, but I believe one of his greatest tools is to create shame in us for who we are.
Yes.
And that causes us to believe God doesn't love us because of who we are. And I think every queer person needs to, when they look in the mirror, need to believe that they're created as intended. They're not a mistake, that our heavenly parents are not disappointed in them, just like a straight person looking in the mirror doesn't wonder if their sexual orientation is acceptable or not acceptable to God. That just puts everybody on the same moral footing. For those of you that are LDS, I don't think that changes church doctrine or church policy. It just makes everybody feel like they're created as intended. Blue-eyed, left-handed, straight, queer, trans. We haven't talked about our trans friends yet. So they come, so I'm kind of answering this in a long way, but that's some of the beginnings, just the beginning part where just this isn't a choice and you can't unchoose it, which caused a whole paradigm shift back to my first point, because now I don't think of queer people and think of this other group of people. I think of our own people. I
Mhm.
think of Latter-day Saints or Christians. I think of family members. I think of people at Sunday school and elders quorum relief society that are closeted, that are listening to everything I say about queer people. And sometimes that's pretty negative. And they grow up feeling that, the people that love me the most are so negative about me. God must feel the same way. And it takes them into this really dark place of shame and self loathing, which can lead to bad behavior. That's not really like bad behavior in the sense it's sort of masking behavior or escaping behavior to deal with all the pain at
Yeah.
the bottom of their iceberg. That's a whole nother subject that good therapists like you solve, Rhonda. But now I just think of queer people as their own people. And for our own church, I've done the math on this. If we take some of the latest Gallup research, about 7 to 8% of Americans identify as something other than 100% heterosexual, and there's 17 million Latter-day Saints. That means about 750,000 Mormons or Latter-day Saints are queer. And you could fill Lavelle Edwards Stadium about 10 times with our own LGBTQ people. So that's pretty powerful. That's two seasons of home games just with people like you, Dakota.
Yeah.
And so for your listeners, and that's one of the things I really encourage us to do is look at LGBTQ people as not this outside group of people. Yeah, there's some queer people that want our church to fail, but there's straight people that want our church to fail. Um, so let's don't get in a binary thing and really recognize LGBTQ people. And then you know, I think of some of the terms that we use for your Latter-day Saint listeners, like the Gathering of Israel. So I think of the Gathering of Israel as what you did, Rhonda, when you and your husband went to Kenya and served a mission and helped non-members find the beautiful restored doctrine of our church. But then I think of the Gathering of Israel as is our own members that have been scattered because of people like me that have said really unkind things about queer people. I thought it was cool. I started in high school. I wasn't like the worst, but I wasn't the best. And that continued. I just thought jokes about queer people were appropriate in our culture and our family circle. And part of the reason I'm in this space is repentance for, what I did in the past. And I have scattered Israel with those comments. I have caused queer Latter-day Saints not to feel welcome. And I want to repent of that and be part of the gathering of queer Latter-day Saints, however that looks, to be gathered just back to our families and reconciled with our families. Those that want to stay in the church that really feel they're welcome here. And we're actually better off with them.
Oh,
And
that's
that kind of leads to Zion, is I think Zion is not sameness, but it's unity in the gospel of Jesus Christ and taking all of our differences that are God given. And we can accomplish more good, I think, in the world with our differences than in sameness. And so for those LGBTQ Latter-day Saints that stay, I don't, we need you and we're better off with you. And I also don't want to see, I could talk for hours or two on this subject.
no, we love it. I love
I
it so
also
much.
I also don't want to make heroes and villains in this story. So sometimes we'll see a celibate gay Latter-day Saint, a man or woman, lesbian, gay, or whatever, fully in the church and celibate. And sometimes their story changes. And, feel their best path forward is a same-sex marriage. So how do I handle that? Well, I don't make them the hero one day and the villain the next day.
Yeah.
And I don't use shaming comments like you're turning your back on your family, your temple covenants. I just say, I'll walk with you. And I feel like people that choose a same sex marriage need our love. It's not selling out the church to support people in same sex marriages. I think that's the, one of the core teachings of Jesus is sometimes we do this false dichotomy that to fully love and follow God, I need to stop loving some people. And he's actually happier that way. I just think it's much simpler that we're just called to love people, unless there's a safety issue. You know, if you're in an abusive situation, however that's defined, don't love that person. You need to get out of that situation. So, you know, I I went down a tangent and I can't get back to where I am, but that's probably a good tangent. Just so I'll always invite people to follow church teachings, but if they feel the same-sex marriage is their path, I'll say make that decision when you're your best self. Don't make it out of anger to the church or showing off your family, or and you might be dealing with legitimate pain that leads to anger, which is an emotion you shouldn't suppress. You need to deal with that. That's a real emotion feeling you can't find a place in your faith community if you feel your best path forward is a same-sex marriage. But when you come to that fork in the road, do it the best way you can. Don't do it out of fear. Don't do it out of anger. Do it when you and do it when you're best self, where you're your best place you are emotionally, especially spiritually, if you're a spiritual person. And then and then I'll just walk with you as you make your way forward. And I won't secretly hope your marriage will fail.
Right.
Um, because you'll come back, however that looks. I'll actually
Right. Yeah.
want your marriage to succeed because I recognize the commitment you're making to go into the legal contract of marriage, and I will be there, and I'll want your marriage to succeed, and I want you to feel my love and support as you make your road forward. So anyway, that's just some thoughts.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I don't know if you know this. Dakota's dad is gay.
I
So
didn't know that. Well, you're
I
an
was married to
extra
Dakota's
awesome
dad
family.
for 24 years. So
Well,
before he's like, I can't do this anymore, which was completely understandable.
and
But
did he
so
come out when you
we
were
have this big long history.
you do, and you as a marriage partner and as a mom, curious, did your husband come out to you before you're married?
He did, yeah. Before
Mm.
we went on our missions, we served missions at the same time. And so he told me he was attracted to men before we both went on our missions. We wrote the whole time. At that time, we share this in another podcast, but at this time, our goal was the gospel, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, and temple marriage and all that that encompasses. And so, yeah, that was what we
Well,
thought.
it's good you two are running a podcast because you have a couple. Mine's kind of theoretical because it's just people I've met. You've got this family story that you're sharing, which is so helpful.
We do. We have
So
a very
thank you,
rainbow family.
thank you for the courage to share your story. And yeah, when I meet with somebody that's gay or lesbian that's in their teens or 20s, I'll sort of say there's these three forks in the road. There's the celibate fork, there's the mixed orientation marriage where one or both aren't straight, and then there's the same-sex marriage. And I'll say the fourth fork in the road is, suicide. And I'll bring that up proactively with people because I want to know where they are. Um, and I don't have any clinical training, but I have enough training to know it's okay to bring that up and ask people follow-up open-ended questions to see if they have a
Absolutely.
plan, see if they have a date, just sort of be a safe person so they can fully open up if they are suicidal.
Absolutely.
Because we want people not to be die by suicide. And that's the primary reason I'm in this space. And both of you know people I bet we've lost. But then each of those are valid paths. Mixed orientation marriage, I write just what you two did. You were honest before you got married about the realities of your husband's situation. And you would know us better than me, but I think there was probably more cultural pressure, even more leaders saying, just get married, this will
Absolutely.
work out. And
Absolutely.
so when I hear a mixed orientation marriage that doesn't work out, I go back to there's no, and maybe you feel differently because there's a lot of pain when a marriage ends, but there's no heroes and no villains here. It's not my job to look at a marriage that ended and find who's the hero and who's the villain. My job is to just try to do the best I can to support, if especially if I know one of the spouses better, to support that spouse as they're making way forward, and just be okay that some marriages end. We've done some podcasts with couples in mixed orientation marriages that are making it work. Most of them will say, don't take that story and make it your story. They will say, write your own story. Our story is a valid story. That's why we're sharing it. It works for us. But don't weaponize our story and give it to a 16-year-old young man or young woman and say, this is the way you live your life going forward as a mixed orientation marriage. I think people do better when they fully own their decision. Um, that's one of the things when I was a singles ward bishop, people said, what should I do, bishop? Thinking I had revelation for them. And I was reluctant because I recognized that a lot of bias. So I said, I taught principles and let people really make their own decisions. So when you come to these forks in the road, don't listen to someone else's story may give you perspective and principles. At the end of the day, you've got to write your own story with God if you're a believer, with your elder brother, our Savior, and try to do that the best way you can, and really own your own story. So, you two know this better than I do, but I think all of those are legitimate paths, and often they come in the 20s. If you're in your teens, you just become the best self you can be now. And even though there's anxiety about your future, you may feel if you're LDS, you can still serve a mission, even if you don't know what your life's going to be post mission. And you can just come to those forks in the road and be the best self you can be as you write your best path forward.
Mm.
And there's a lot of ways for people to live life. Well, I won't go down that road. I'm going to stop there.
I am curious to hear what your perspective would be on how somebody can find what their best self looks like or feels like when especially for somebody who might be seeking external validation um, from a church leader or from parents um, who might not agree with their way of thinking. What would be your recommendation or advice for somebody who is truly trying to learn who they are and what it looks like to move forward with as their best self as an individual?
Great question, Dakota. And you could probably give a better answer than I'm going to give because you've done this. um, so we're going to do a podcast with you two. And I'm going to ask this question to you if I can
Okay.
remember. And I'm going to be doing a lot less talking because I want to hear your stories. If they're religious, I think um, the stories I've heard are some of the people that have faith in God. I'm going to answer this from perspective as those that don't believe in God too. But those that believe in God, some of the best stories I've heard are people that have just prayed to God and asked God, how do you feel about me?
Mm,
And what do you really think about me? And often that's a question they're scared to ask because everybody else they've asked the question, the answer hasn't been very supportive. And some people get, I'm not sure this is going to work for everybody, just this overhauled feeling that God loves me, and that He loves every part of me. And there's no mistake here. Our theology of LDS is we live before we were born and we came to mortality, and that, God and I kind of worked out our mortality, and every part of me is pleasing to God, and every part of me is part of my mission on earth to grow and to bless others. And I don't want this car. And they get to the point where if there were a red button on the table and they could push it to make themselves straight, yeah, sometimes they'd love to push it because it'd be great to just fit in a heteronormative world. But they're so confident and so at peace and so sure who they are that they would never press it.
mm,
They don't want to be straight. And takes a long time. If you're a queer and listening and you think I can't get there, um, I think you can, and give yourself a lot of grace because it takes time from the stories I've heard. Now, another part of that is therapy. I think therapists have superpowers to help people accept themselves, and they've gone to school like Rhonda has, and they have clinical training and clinical experience to help people feel good about they are and be able to take off all those layers in a safe way and help people feel good about they are. and probably listening to affirming podcasts or stories or characters. This applies to you that are trans, that have gender dysphoria. You're under a lot of political rhetoric right now. And I love my trans friends. You're just some of my heroes right now. And I wish I could lift the burden for the extra burdens being placed on you right now. If you're a not believer, then I would start with therapy and start with stories, yoga, meditation, whatever you can do to sort of get to the core of who you are. I've always told people, sometimes they'll get a message from somebody who says, I'll never be on your podcast. I'm gay and I'm closeted. And I used to think, well, that's kind of lame. You're not out. And then I've sort of a rebuke of the spirit. I thought, no, who is it my job to tell someone they should come out? But I would say that person needs to come out to themselves
Mm.
and totally accept this within yourself, because you're going to get out of the shame, self-loathing, hating world. If you can accept this for yourself, and if you're a believer, come out to God and find out how God feels about you. We believe God is our heavenly parents, a heavenly mother, and a heavenly father. They're both there. And sometimes coming out to one or the other is a little easier for a queer
Yeah.
person. It's part of our theology that we don't talk about too much, but I've heard some stories where people start first kind of coming out with the feminine divine, and they feel more safe with that because the men in their life have been pretty difficult. And there's probably stories the other way. So that's a little nuance of our theology. Um, but I don't think if you're listening and you're queer, you need to come out broadly if you don't feel. I think you can still love yourself and be authentic and not come out if for some reason that's not your path. And don't feel shame for that because you're not on a podcast or out to everybody. But a lot of people do come out, and it's really helpful for them, as you know, Dakota, firsthand. Just you're not pretending to be something you're not, and you can be authentic with who you are. And all this anxiety in your mind about how people will accept me, it's probably pretty choppy, and it was 15 years ago when you came out. It's better now, but sometimes it's relieving to come out now. One of the things I've started to share is, now that we're empty nesters, I wish I had, when we had kids in the home at the right age, I wish I would have said, this is what being gay and trans and lesbian is bi is. And this is just a minority of the pop. These are gender minorities or sexual minorities. This isn't a shameful conversation or something I'm talking about in whispered tones. And I would say, this is what this is. And also, if you feel you're not 100% heterosexual, this is how I will respond as your parent. And so it takes all the anxiety out ahead of time. Uh, I could have done that as a YSA bishop, and I could have said, I want to love all of you where you are. Um, if you are walking any of these following roads, working on any of these following things, some that are sin related and some that aren't, like sexual orientation is not sin related. And you want somebody to walk with you on that road in pastoral care, I'll walk with you, and this is how I respond. Um, so that's just some thoughts. One quick third side note is, when I was a bishop of this congregation, from 2013 to 2016, the last 6 months I put a pride flag in my logo. Um, and I put LGBTQ ally, and it's still there in Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I think some of my fellow leaders were kind of, that's not what we usually do, but I just felt impressed to own being an ally the way I could. And what happened in our congregation is no more queer people came out to me. But what happened, and this is a powerful principle, is a bunch of, I mean, like 10 straight people said, okay, I can talk to this guy. If he's going to be proactively kind to queer people, which you shouldn't be, which should be easy, it should be the baseline, then I know I can talk to him about what's going on in my life. And what a beautiful parenting principle if we're kind to people that are different from us in our dinner time conversations, even people that have left our church. It just creates a culture for our kids to say, okay, I can actually open up to mom and dad. I've got some thoughts as a 13-year-old, or I'm cheating as a 15-year-old, or I'm looking at pornography as a 17-year-old or a 10-year-old. And I actually want to talk to my parents about this, but I don't know how, and I don't know how they'd respond. So that's kind of a tangent.
Oh, that was a beautiful tangent. I really appreciate that because it is so important how we talk about others, especially the marginalized opens doors for others who feel maybe marginalized, maybe a completely different reason, a completely different thing going on in their life, but they hear how you talk about this other group and then they feel safe. I think that's so important, like absolutely important. I want to kind of go back, and it's quite a ways, but it keeps coming to me. And so when something comes to me, I feel like it's important to share. Um, you shared just a little bit about kind of us and them. You know, we do that sometimes in the church. There's us, the covenant path keepers, you know, and them, you know, whoever them else is, but we have a lot of thems. I remember going to a Relief Society class a long time ago, and Relief Society is the women's class at church. And the Relief Society teacher was talking about how she was going to school full time at a local community college, and her class was going to go and listen to a panel of LGBTQ plus people. And this is before the legalization of same sex marriage. This is quite some time ago. But of course, being married to Barry at that time, my heart had a very soft spot
Mm,
for that community. And we were still closeted. We hadn't come out yet. You know, he hadn't come out, so I hadn't shared, you know. And she made this comment. She's like, I didn't want to hear what they had to say.
wow.
I didn't want to listen to them. And I remember just this ouch of it's not them, it's us. My husband is down the hall right now in
Wow.
you know, the priesthood meeting. It's an us. You don't know it because we haven't shared, but it's an us. And I just remember just this pain of there's no us and them. It is always us. It is always we. Everything is we. Everything we do is attached to another human being. There's never us and them. Whether that be political difference, whether that be lifestyle difference, whether that be religion difference, there's never us and them. There is only us. There is only we.
Well, I sure agree with that. And I think, we're tribal by historical DNA. And I think Christianity sometimes needs a villain or needs and some church leaders are more like this and others sort of need to rally around a cause to create community. And I just believe what you said. One of the most powerful things that happened to me that I share when I speak in church settings about this is serving my mission in 1980 in Northern England. Our mission president felt the culture was too much us versus the Church of England. And we'd made this unneeded bogeyman that became the butt of our jokes in district meeting and zone meeting. And it brought us all together. It's called common enemy intimacy. If the bond we share is simply to hate the same people, the intimacy experience is intense and the easy way to discharge our anger when pain. It's not fuel for real connection. That's a Brene Brown quote.
Yeah.
So our mission president said, we are the message of the restored gospel is just all positive. We don't need to bag on Church of England. We can have a fact-based discussion without creating a villain here. And it's part of discipleship, just what you're talking about, Rhonda. So to drive that point home, he befriended a vicar at a famous Church of England in our mission boundaries. And we had an all mission conference in a Church of England, and the
Ah,
vicar spoke, and
beautiful.
we felt the spirit. No one joined the Church of England, but he just changed the culture of our mission as he humanized the vicar and this beautiful building. And our baptism rate soared, and it planted something in me that you just talked about. The gospel of Jesus Christ doesn't need a villain. It's beautiful, and it doesn't. Political ideology often does to get rally around a political cause. Unfortunately, it could be just kind of fact-based issue discussions, but it's often very personal and very fear-based, and that gets into our DNA and can cause us to be really motivated about the other side and the fear of the other side. But I just don't think I look at what Christ did, just like he did not do that.
No.
he was constantly going out to people that people in authority said were not worthy or not okay to be with, and he just dined with them. So, you know, I just think we can live a higher, holier law versus a lower law, which is I've had some really hard times in church in my core meeting where since I became an ally, where we bagged on trans people, we bagged on gay people, and unfortunately, I didn't say anything. I just left the meeting. I wish I were a little stronger and just said something at the time. So I hear everything now a lot through marginalized ears because I've heard so many of those stories. So we just need to do better. And I think it's part of, you know, being better disciples is better seeing everybody. LDS theology should be the best that we talk about this, Rhonda, because we all believe we were spirit brothers and sisters in the pre-earth life. Everybody on the earth, we believe, are children of the same heavenly parents that chose to come here. And so when we go to our theology at that level, the person that walked in your office needing help to overcome drug use, you saw her as your sister.
After I was called to repent.
Well, I think your heart was really good in the first place. You were just
Right.
like all of us, naturally fearful, maybe because of what been portrayed on media or people have said. And then you just saw this wonderful woman and saw that the core of her was actually really good. And she was dealing with stuff at the top of the iceberg that you could help her with that really was different, fundamentally different than her core. So, you know, I mourn right now because we have more loud political voices that cause us how to feel about people on the margins. And I just invite us all to read the New Testament and how we should feel about people on the margins, listen to people on the margins. We can still hold the same laws, the same values, but it's the trap of unlearned opinions, or we can just live a higher, holier law. And it's relieving because I don't have fear now of lots of people I used to be fearful of. And it's my heart's grown because of that. One of the things I'll also say, because sometimes I'm not, back to your very first question, was uncomfortable on queer people at first. And I'm using queer listeners because my queer friends are using that term. That's a term that's very negative from my age, but younger people are using that as an umbrella term to describe someone that's not 100% heterosexual, both trans and LGB. So that's why I use that term. It's a good umbrella term. It may be offensive to some, but it seems to be a term that's gaining more broad acceptance. But now I lost my train of thought, darn it. Oh, I remember. I came back to me. I remember a couple of years ago just doing podcasts with Black Latter-day Saints, and I got really uncomfortable during the podcast of the things they were saying. And I had to sit there for a minute because my prior self would have said, when I get uncomfortable, it's the spirit leaving the room, and I need to leave the room with the spirit. And that could be true. But what was really happening here is I was having to face internalized racism that I had, and I didn't even know it because I thought I was a good friend to my Black Latter-day Saint friends. But when they were opening up about some things that had happened to them, that made me really uncomfortable because I could have and maybe did the same thing. So when you feel that uncomfortableness, sometimes it's the personal growth we need to make to get rid of sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, things that I don't think Christ had any of those in him because of his um, deity origins. That's not a word, but I'm using that just because he was perfect and he didn't have any of this with him. And we have that as mortals. And some of that, I think that's all learned. Maybe it's natural. We're reserved around people that look different than us. But so if things are uncomfortable, we hear from LGBTQ people in the space. I just invite us to sit there for a little bit and just ask ourselves, like I'm trying to continually do, is those are changes I need to make to better see these people the way God sees them.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Something that came to mind yesterday, it was a bit of a personal revelation, was um, the idea of loving our enemy.
Wow.
And I was thinking, I don't have any enemies. Like I love everybody, and I don't really have any ill will against anybody, because my mental image that I had created within myself of what an enemy would look like is, a villain in the story, or, somebody that I'm battling against actively, or proclaiming my hate or disdain for them. But instead, it was a lot more subtle than that with what came to mind. It was actually a family member that I um, had kind of a history of some jealous feelings of.
Wow.
And something so simple like that, and the spirit just was so clear, but also so soft and gentle. Of uh, your family in this instance is your enemy, and you need to love them. You need to pray
Wow.
for them, and so what I did is I've been writing out just like affirmations for myself, positive affirmations, and um, I wrote one out for this specific person, and or a few people actually that came to mind, and I just wrote down kind of a prayer, if you will, for their success, and for their proclaiming from myself their worthiness of every blessing that comes their way. And the level of physical discomfort I felt while writing that out and reading it out loud to myself in private was alarming, truly, because I didn't realize that I was harboring these harmful feelings that were never leaving my mind, but damaging my personal heart, my personal soul, and my personal mental health, really, because it isn't about them, it was about me. And I needed to read that out loud, and by the end of reading it a couple times out loud, I was just emotional, and I felt this massive weight lift off of my shoulders, and could breathe. And like I said, I was kind of welling up with tears by the end, and I was having this physical reaction and response to these words that I really didn't even know that I needed to write. So I think that when we think of the Savior's invitation, or commandment to love our neighbor, and to love our enemy, and pray for those that despitefully use you. Maybe this family member that I was thinking of wasn't despitefully using me, but to pray for them. Um, we think of, oh well, I love everybody, but I'm uncomfortable around this group of people, so I avoid them. Well, then they became your enemy.
Yeah.
And I think it was a hard pill for me to swallow when I realized that all of these subtleties is what made somebody my enemy, because it wasn't this blaringly obvious, we're battling one another with swords in hand. It was somebody that I proclaim love for every day, or whenever they come up in mind. Um, but when I really would think about them, or something that uh, whatever it is that they would do, or a different group of people, in whatever circumstance, if it's something that makes us uncomfortable to the point of avoiding them, or uncomfortable in the sense of, oh well, I wish this, that, or the other, or if it's something that causes us to become jealous or covetous, or something that causes us to have unpleasant, negative emotions towards them, well, they've become your enemy at that point. And I think that we need to recognize that and accept that invitation from Christ to love them, and to pray for them, and to celebrate successes when they come to them. Another thought that I had that came to me yesterday as well, was I I've really struggled personally with finances and just throughout my life, and I was trying to pinpoint when that really happened. And it was a mindset shift that happened actually around the time when I met my husband, Ty. And I think what actually happened was that my subconscious didn't believe that I was deserving of good things because of who I fell in love with or because of who I am. Uh, because well, blessings only happen for the stalwart, faithful, perfect Latter-day Saint people. They're the only ones that deserve blessings. And well, all of a sudden I'm not that, so I don't deserve these blessings anymore. And it wasn't this conscious thing that I was aware of really again until just yesterday, that I actually stopped in my tracks and just like zoned out for a minute thinking about that. I was like, oh my gosh, how many times have blessings come to me and I've rejected them because of my own self perception of, oh, I'm not deserving of that because of who I am. And so I love what you've shared in this hour together
Yeah.
of coming to coming out to yourself and accepting yourself radically, and coming out and to God and asking our Father in heaven, what do you think of me? Because when I take the time to do that, I'm just filled with peace. I'm filled with love. I'm filled with self acceptance, and sure, things that I need to improve upon within my life to be more like Christ. However, it's never disdain or distaste for myself or for others. It's always love. It's always hope. It's always um, acceptance and a warm embrace. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Let me
For sharing
just,
everything that
I'd
you
love to comment on the last 5 minutes of this podcast where you just went solo for however long it was, 3 to 5 minutes, are the best part of this podcast, by the way. And if I had heard you if 10 years ago, I wouldn't think what it was possible that someone in a same-sex marriage could have a relationship with God, could be as spiritually and emotionally mature as you. That part about loving your enemies is just beautiful, Dakota. And your work to just write that out because of your great heart wanting to love everybody in your family and wanting to improve things. And then this segment about so self-aware, Dakota. I mean, you are in a great spot. You're still young compared to me. You're 30, but the spiritual maturity, the emotional maturity, and this whole segment where you're able to be self-aware enough to know that I got in the financial trouble sort of was at the top of the iceberg. Sometimes we just deal with it, it's top of the iceberg stuff. This is what a therapist like Rhonda told me. Um, but it's the bottom of the iceberg stuff that you were intuitive to say, well, what's really going on here is I falsely concluded God doesn't love me
mm,
because I'm in a same-sex marriage and not on the Mormon traditional path. And I believe God loves you. And I believe nothing we can do, listening to all our listeners, can take us outside of God's love. Yeah, worthiness to go to the temple can come and go, but worth is set and God's love is set.
mm,
And and that what you just talked about is super powerful. And it's a credit to you and the work you've done, the mom you have, your relationship with God. I love you mentioned your husband Ty,
Oh, he's great.
and he's great. And that you've got each other and you can share your lives together. Um, and so that was just a beautiful segment. I don't know if you've got time for this, but in general conference in October, we had a wonderful conference talk from a Black general authority, Elder Brown. It was one of the talks that people just love the most. I
It
think
was
it's
an
Elder Brown.
It
excellent
was
talk.
my
And you
It
favorite.
was one of the
and
few that I
so
actually caught.
I think I was
yeah,
intending to watch
I
this
had
one.
already watched it
Okay.
too.
you had watched it, so there you go. Respect.
Was
But
so
it was a great talk, but I recognized if I were living in the 60s or 70s when I was a 10-year-old, there's no possibility that Elder Brown is giving that talk in church because of where we were with Black people and the things we said about them and the reasons they didn't have the priesthood and and now we're past all that. And Elder Black Latter-day Saints could have given the same talk Elder Brown gave in 1960 or 1970. There were Black Christians and Black Latter-day Saints that understood the gospel as well enough as Elder Brown, but because they were Black, they didn't have the priesthood, they didn't have a chance to speak. And so, no surprise to my wife when I say this kind of stuff, and maybe not to you, I thought, I yearn for the day where a gay Latter-day Saint can give a talk like that in general conference. Because you just gave it, Dakota. You just gave an incredible talk that applies to the whole human family. And I recognize you're in a same-sex marriage. You're not going to be able to speak at general conference.
Not anytime
But,
soon.
and I'm not implying that our doctrine or policy is going to change. It could, but I support our doctrine and policy and recognize it's not my job to decide if there's changes. But I do hope, whether it's a celibate gay Latter-day Saint or whatever, that we hear from queer Latter-day Saints because they have wonderful insights in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we're better off for them, just like we're better off with giving Elder Brown a place in the church to have the priesthood and fully participate. We're stronger as a church and more people feel welcome. So that's a tangent, but it's you made that possible. But you're the hero of the podcast, Dakota.
Absolutely.
And this is a payday for your mom, just to see you alive and doing well and thriving. And the fact you were two, I don't know when you first came out. We can talk about this on our podcast. If you'd ever imagined you'd be both talking about this publicly. Um,
Not in this format.
but look at what you've done as a family to
Yes.
model a family. But look at your great heart, what you just said in that last 5 minutes. So you're the hero of the show, Dakota. And I hope we hear more of your stories.
Well, thank you, Richard. I appreciate it, and
Thank you
and
so
I'm
much.
sure you will. I have plenty of them. I just do my best to. Well, I just do my best.
Yeah.
That's all.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. When we decided we were going to do this, you were one of the very first people I wrote down in well, it was actually my phone, put in my phone that I wanted you on our podcast. Because again, you've touched my life. So thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you so much to our listeners for another week of I'll Walk With You. Until next time, once again, I'm Dakota Moses.
Rhonda Monson.
Thank you so much.